to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, designed to give you more joy, less fear, and no end to the evidence that a bright future is possible for us all. This podcast will give you a fresh perspective on the world around you. We want you to hear from thought leaders in a wave of goodness and progress all around the globe that almost no one knows about. I'm Dr. Linda Ulrich, founder of Ever Widening Circles, the place on the web to hear about insight and innovation going uncelebrated with no politics and no commercialism. We're just telling you what should be on the evening news there. I've all along the journey for Ever Widening Circles, we've been at this since 2014. I've been talking to thought leaders who are fundamentally creating a better world for us all. And I started recording these conversations back in October of 2020 so that we could share the kind of hope that I hear every day from people all around the world doing amazing things. So here we are today. Today we're chatting with Mark Redmond. He's a thought leader in his 39th year of helping kids from very tough circumstances be successful despite the odds against them. You know, Mark and I became friends when a mutual acquaintance introduced us, and I read the first chapter of a manuscript of the book that he's just published. I'm telling you, you want your faith restored in humanity, and your windows of opportunity and possibility opened up, read Mark's book. He will, well, look, I got goosebumps. Mark, I'm so glad to have you on again. Mark was one of the very first people I interviewed back in October of 2020, before this book was even a thing. It was just words on a page, but now it's a real thing. And I am so glad to have you back. Mark, do a better job introducing yourself.
Linda, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me back again. I love your podcast.
I'm so glad.
So I live in Vermont like you do, probably not far from you, actually.
Yeah.
I've been up here since 2003, serving as executive director of Spectrum Youth and Family Services. At Spectrum, we work with, as you say, young teenagers and young adults who are struggling, and they could be homeless, could be runaways, suffering from addiction, suffering from mental health difficulties. Maybe they were former gang members, kids who've committed a crime and they're in the criminal justice system, kids who are in the foster care system, unemployed, high school dropouts. And as I tell people, usually a combination of some or maybe all of those things. And I've been at Spectrum for 18 years, but I've done this kind of work for 40 years. This June 20th will be my 40th anniversary. My family still thinks this is a phase I'm going through.
Mine too.
They hope I'm going to snap out of it, come back to my senses.
I totally know that feeling.
So anyway, but yeah, and then so I've been doing this kind of work, and I've written this book. I've written a lot of columns. I've had columns published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Forbes. I had one prior book published in 2004, and I call this my pandemic book. None of us could go to work. I thought, well, I'll work from home and I'll work on this book at the same time. So it's self-published through Onion River Press, and I'm very, very happy that this is coming out. And I'm delighted that you want to talk to me about the book.
Oh, it's such a wonderful emotional fullness that you get from this book, because the number one thing that I took away, unlike all the world out there just driving away at the doom and gloom, your book helped me be able to hold some discouraging things that are happening in the world in one hand and still, feel like things could be bad, but getting better. I mean, the number one takeaway is how powerful we are to influence the lives of others, Mark.
Well, good. I'm glad you got that out of the book. That was one of the main intentions, I mean, the kind of work that I do and I've been doing for 4 decades, it's wonderful. It's amazing. It's so rewarding. I have stacks of letters and emails from former youth who are doing well and from parents. But at the same time, Linda, and I write about this, and you probably, some really terrible things happen too, some tragic things,
Tragic.
There's a long line of young people I know have committed suicide, kids who are now adults and they're in prison or they're in the adult mental health system. So not every case, if you go into this kind of work, you're not going to have a happy ending every time. But what I found is what you said, even when there's tragedy, one of the stories I read about is a young man who tragically took his own life. He was homeless. We took him in. He wanted to join the Marines. He was determined to do that. He went to boot camp. My father-in-law is a former Marine. I had everybody write to him. When he graduated from boot camp, every other kid there had a family member to go to graduation. He did not. So I paid for one of our staff to fly down to Quantico and go to that. And I remember he called me, the boy called me, and he was so grateful. And then everything fell apart after that. And he came back to Burlington. He was discharged. I don't know why. And then I read the paper one night online and he took his life. And it was so sad. But I went to the wake and then I got a phone call. It was very strange. I got a phone call from a neighbor. And she said to me, in the obituary, it said, leaves behind the loving family of blah, blah, blah. And she said, that was a lie. There really was never a loving family. If that boy had any loving family at all, it was you and your coworkers at Spectrum, And it's funny, you go into our building here and we have pictures of youth, that from years ago. And there's one picture of a group of boys having dinner together in one of our houses and they're laughing and smiling. And I stop and look because he's in that picture and he's got a big smile on our face. And everybody else walks in, they just think it's a group of boys. There's only like 2 people who still work here, who still remember him, but everybody else, it's just a picture of some kids. And I always think of what that neighbor said. And I think he did have a tragic ending, but he did know for one point in his life that he was loved. And he was really cherished and honored and valued as a human being while he was here. So that means a lot to me, even though it was a terrible ending that was so sad. He did know for one period of life that he was loved. So that means a lot to me.
And this is such an important point, Mark. I talk to people. I talk to people all the time who are definitely feeling the impulse to do things for others, to do what they can do to make the world a better place, large and small, all the time. And the number one thing I tend to gravitate towards in conversation with people is that we should be super proud and super happy to just get people 1 yard down the field. It's not like we can make a touchdown for others. We can't do that. The best we can be is be the coach from the sidelines, giving them plays for their playbook.
That's a great way to put it. And I used to play football in high school.
Yes.
It's 1 yard at a time. Right.
Games are won 1 yard at a time.
Occasionally you throw a Hail Mary pass and you win. But that's rare. That's rare.
That's so rare. And a lot of people find it hard to get started in doing something good for others, whether it be volunteering for the Humane Society board or volunteering at the food shelf or helping an organization like yours. A lot of or starting something out of the blue like I did and you did. It's hard to get started because you think, I'll never make a difference. I cannot do enough to help that thing. Right. But that's not the point. The point is that life is a game of inches.
Yeah, it's true. I like that idea that you have to start. So I'll give you an example. Like, up near where you live, we've just opened a drop-in center for young people in St. Albans. Yes. Now, I've been talking about that for 5 years, because we have 2 staff up there working with youth in foster care. They said there needs to be a drop-in center where kids, there's no Boys and Girls Club.
Yes.
So I've been talking to my board. How do we do this? How do we do this? Do we have the money? Where can we raise the money? And last summer, out of the blue, a donor called me. I was on vacation. He said, hey, my father wants to give money to 3 different nonprofits. You're on the list. What do you need money for? I said, we've been talking about St. Albans for years. He said, I'll call you right back. He said, we'll give you $200,000. So That gets us started, Lynn. You know what I mean? I went to our board director and said, look, I don't have enough. 200,000 is great. It's so generous. It gets us through about a year and a half. I think we should make a 3-year commitment, and we'll figure it out. And I'm going to announce today at the thing, we just got a federal grant of $300,000.
Oh my gosh, I can tell
know.
this whole interview is going to be just one giant goosebump after another. I've already had goosebumps 3 times talking to you, and we're just barely into this thing. Okay, so I want to rewind a little bit because we got to celebrate about 5 different things that you talked about.
There's a lot to celebrate. Which
Maybe
is
we'll
good.
go. Yes,
good.
This is so good. Okay, so I got introduced to Mark through a mutual friend who does a lot of good in her community. That's her whole life is devoted to making the world a better place. And she's doing that by just plugging into different organizations and people. She's a connector, I would say.
Wouldn't you agree? That's a good way to put it. She is.
Yeah. But that's her gift. And that's the first thing I want people to take away from our conversation today is you've got a gift. You've got people skills, or you've got some hobby that you know a lot about that could bring joy to others, or you have some strength that is just waiting to be taught to others, young people or old people or whatever. Each one of us has something that we can do. And so she is a connector. There's no doubt about it. And look at what has happened since then, because you and I just exploded into connection right after that. And, I'm a dentist, as you know, and I spent all fall talking to people about you and our conversation and your plans for St. Albans, this walk-in center and so forth. And my gosh, then March rolled around. Share with us how you generated this additional money, because I think that's an extraordinary story.
So, you're right. So this donor calls me and says, my father's going to donate $200,000, so I went to the board. And then there's another donor who, again, doesn't even live in your county, who a few years ago said, I think I want to help Spectrum help the kids in St. Albans who are homeless. I'll pledge $100,000 if you can raise it. So once we had the 200, I called her up and said, please send the donation. And then somebody from Peter Welch's office saw that we announced this on Facebook, and she said, do you know there's this federal money? It's competitive. You have to apply for it. So we applied for that. We just found out we got that. So, it's so interesting. And then My Land is a company that's up there. They donated. Ben & Jerry's has a huge plant up there.
Huge.
They are helping us. So one thing leads to the other, right? And, we still have a long way to go. I want to open up shelter beds. We have a drop-in center now. At some point, I want to open up beds, which will cost more money. But there is a certain energy that about that gets generated once you start an idea and you really start talking about it and convince people, which isn't hard to do, of the value. It just moves forward. And I've seen that dynamic, and I knew of too multiple times,
Yeah.
So, people say, how did you get into this whole storytelling thing? I had a one-person show on Broadway, and I'm like, I got into it. I left a 2-minute phone message for the Moth in 2013 and didn't think anything about it. If you had told me then, hey, this is going to lead to this, and this, and you're going to be on Broadway and then have a book go out, I never would have believed you.
Never.
But the 2-minute message led to all these other things. I'm glad I left the 2-minute message.
Okay, so, and this is the way it is. I've been looking at how here on the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, we can help people cope through this particular long slog of the pandemic. This is, I remember this time last year, I thought, by September, we'll have this.
Right, we all did.
If we'd all known, we would be sitting right where we are today. So, trying to be useful and helpful always, I started this podcast with the intent of talking to thought leaders like you who are doing things to make the world a better place, and how your vision of what's possible and the things you've learned through the process can help us in some practical way. If it's only inspiration, great. But what you just told me is that, every journey of some imaginable magnitude started with one simple move.
It's true. It's really true. And I have we hired a new development staff yesterday, and he said, wow, you have all these wealthy people in Vermont who are donating to Spectrum. How did you do it? And I said, I came up here, I was from Connecticut, I knew nobody. And I said, I was walking into Halverson's early on to go to lunch, and I see this guy walk out the door, and I thought, I worked with him in New York City in 1979 for an insurance company. So I ran out onto this Church Street, and I yelled, Jeff Norris. And he wheels around and he goes, who are you, and how do you know my name? And I said, we worked together 30-some years ago. So we shook hands, and he had just moved up here himself, and he was working for a big investment firm. We had lunch a week later. And he said, I want you to meet Rob Miller. Rob Miller worked for Howard Dean. He was developer, head of economic development. So I met with Rob Miller, and I said, who are the people I need to know, And he listed off 15 names. And I just went through, I still have the list. It's a handwritten list somewhere. And then I just went through that list, calling these people. I'm new. I've taken over this organization. We need a lot of help. I mean, back then we were scraping by. Every payroll was like, are we going to make it,
Yeah.
And our houses were yucky, and we needed new furniture,
Yeah.
And I can tell you, every one of those people, and at the end of the conversation, I would say, thank you for your time. Who do you think I should meet next? And everybody always said, oh, go meet this person. I'll set this up. So, now we've that first year we raised $49,000 in donations. This year we're going to raise over $3 million. So yeah, I mean, it's just now it's been an 18-year, but the trajectory has been up and up. And it's great we've been able to do that, but that has allowed us to do so many more things. I mean, St. Albans is just the latest thing, Linda, but we have expanded and are helping so many more young people than ever before, which is the whole idea. It's nice to raise the money, but it's all about what you do with that and to create a better world.
This is it. I mean, okay, so that's the thing, is that most of us have, well, I think one of the things that I learned, I know so many patients have expressed this to me. One of the things that we learned with the pandemic that could be a good outcome, sort of there's so much tragedy from the pandemic, but if we look for the opportunity in disaster, we will find it. And one of the things I'm noticing is that it got us off our treadmills, our constant sort of mindless routines every day,
Right.
And it slowed us down. And we started deciding that some of our priorities before the pandemic were not that good.
Right.
We started prioritizing others. And I noticed that a lot of people with a little bit more time and a slower lifestyle started following these impulses to help others, even if it was checking on a neighbor that was older. Have you seen any of this play out in the pandemic for your organization?
We've definitely seen that. People, it's been really hard. We have a big mentoring program. It's hard to do mentoring over Zoom. Maybe if you knew the young person before, you could do it. It's hard to start a mentoring relationship by Zoom.
Yeah.
But people have come through just like even people want to give to something that works and is effective. So the sleep out there. Okay, so the sleep out, you've heard about that. We have all these people. We've been doing this for 10 years. And, we have everybody sleep in the snow in a park in downtown Burlington. We were going to do it up by you in Taylor Park, but of course we couldn't do it. So I thought, well, we'll ask people to sleep in their backyard. But how effective is that going to be? Linda, we have more people than ever doing the sleep out in their backyard than ever before.
And this is March in Vermont.
Oh yeah, we do it when it's cold. When we first started, my staff wanted the spring. I'm like, we are not doing this. No. We are doing it in March.
So, people all over the world listen to this podcast, and they have to appreciate that in March.
It's cold.
That was March. What was it, like March 15th?
No, it's usually like the last Thursday in March. Or March 27th.
We still had 1.5 feet of snow.
Oh yeah. Oh no, you're out there in snow. This is not Florida or Virginia even. I know.
And people did it. And you guys
more people than ever did it. We raised more money than ever. More people did it. It was crazy,
And they did it with their kids, and they did it with
It did.
with their
And they
pod.
woke up and then we had a giant Zoom session in the morning and people told they were in their tents and they were Zooming and it was really moving, you know. But then people have helped in other ways. This is, you know, one of the people I asked to look at my book, he's a wonderful author, Stephen Kiernan. He's a novelist in Vermont. And he looked at the book and he liked it and wrote a little blurb for the back. And then he called me like 2 weeks ago. I said, I have a neighbor. She has an idea for a spectrum. So, all right. So this woman said, hey, I moved up here from Long Island years ago and I taught myself computers, how to set up computers. So I have this little business where I go around, it's mostly elderly people. They get a printer, they don't know how to install it. They need to upgrade their operating system. They don't know how to do that. She goes, but I'm ready to retire. I will teach one or more of your youth at Spectrum how to do this. And I'll give them my customer list and they can take. So I called this young woman. I know her very well. My wife and I took a immigrant family in, a new American family leaving the war-torn Somalia 14 years ago. And the little girl who was 5 then she's 21 now. And no, she was 7. She's 21, very good on computers, high school graduate. I said to her, why don't you, this woman will teach you. So they're meeting this week. She may train her. So, I mean, it's just another example. That woman didn't have to do that. But I think she talked to Stephen Kiernan. And Stephen Kiernan said, oh, let me put you in touch with Mark and Spectrum. And if it doesn't work out with this young woman, I'll find somebody else. But I mean, I'm seeing, somebody came to see me the other day. Remember, if you ever go to Waterbury, there's the big Green Mountain Coffee Roaster plant.
Yeah.
Right in front of it is a little cafe. I didn't realize it's closed down. This fellow said, I own a coffee company. I will supply the machines, the coffee, everything. I want Spectrum and your kids to reopen that cafe and run that cafe as a business. I don't know if we're going to do it. We might. But I mean, people do want to help. People do want to, and people come from all walks of life. And when they see an organization like ours that is making a difference, they want to plug into that and make a difference too. I see that over and over again. It's amazing.
So this is the Spectrum.
Yeah, that's our name. There you go. That's how we got our name. Perfect.
This is the spectrum of how people can make the world a better place. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everything from giving money that is without any attachments, like use Spectrum, spend it in the best way you know how, to contributing to a specific project that really is meaningful to people, to sleeping out in your backyard and teaching your kids the value of all the teachable moments around that are extraordinary. Around that particular thing. But this, someone who's ready to retire, passing off something that promising to a young person. Wow. And that back to our football analogy is like offering someone a play for their playbook that could get them another first down.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, that's something. And the coffee thing might work out too. And, we've talked before, we have a detail shop. We started a detail business and where we hire kids and teach them how to detail cars,
Wow. I didn't know that.
In fact, I know a young man who's going to be interviewing for that this week. So yeah, all of these different ways we can connect. And you're right, people from all different walks, like this fellow knows coffee. He knows the coffee business. I don't know anything about coffee. Yeah. I love coffee. But he wants to help. He wants to use, so people can use their expertise in such a variety of ways,
Right.
You don't have to do what I did and completely change the path you were on,
Right.
You can stay that the path you're on, but use that to help others.
Well, we should talk at least for a moment about the path you were on, just so people have some context for how you came to be here. Tell people about your path.
So I always think, people who run places like Spectrum, if you ask them, why are you doing this work? They'll either tell you, hey, I grew up in this really rough family and I suffered from addiction and I was a runaway and I was in prison and then I got better, and that is not my story at all. Or I grew up in this really nice middle-class family on Long Island. My dad went to school at college at night. He grew up in poverty, went to school at night on the GI Bill, and managed to send all 5 of his kids through private universities, no loans, very nice upbringing. So I'm not a former prisoner or So when I was a senior in high school, I got turned down from Yale, Princeton, Brown, Dartmouth, Williams, and Hamilton. So my backup school was Villanova. And
Yeah.
so when I had to send in my parents had to send in the first check, which of course is a fraction of what it is today. I had to fill out a form. It said, pick one box. It said business, arts and sciences, nursing, and engineering. So I turned to my dad. I said, hey, which box should I check? He said, well, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I don't know. I'm 17. I don't have a clue. So he said, well, put down business. Everybody studies the same stuff anyway.
Right.
Because he worked in business. He was a very successful commercial real estate broker.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I did. I studied business. And a couple of things happened that were important my senior year, but I eventually ended up in this great job on Madison Avenue. You know, I had the suits and the ties and a car and a studio apartment on the Upper East Side with a balcony and a barbecue, and I'd have parties, you know. And I heard about this place, Covenant House, which was in Times Square. Times Square today is really like Disney and Hard Rock Cafe. It was not like that in 1981. In fact, that was the year Rolling Stone magazine declared it the sleaziest block in America. It was really dangerous. It was the center of prostitution, pornography, crime, and that's where homeless kids were. So I started volunteering there. I thought I'll just go there one night a week and hand out brownies and play basketball. But over time, I began to realize, you know what, this is what I really want to do with my life. And I remember going back, I was in this training program. We were supposed to be the future, you know, presidents of this company. It was a multi-billion-dollar company. And I remember going to a meeting and the senior vice president said, we're now at, I don't know what the number was, 50 billion in assets. And our goal is to get to 70 billion in assets by the end of the decade. And that's what you all have to, that's the goal. That's what you all have to focus on. And I remember thinking, that's not my goal. You know, I'm not saying it's wrong or it's evil, or I'm just saying that's not what I want to make as my goal. So to my friend's chagrin, I gave up the job. Somebody got my car. I think it was my brother, gave up the apartment, gave up all the suits, and I moved into this hovel of a room that had roaches. Not even an apartment, a room across from a crack house and a strip club, and just started working with homeless teenagers. And June 20th will be the 40th year since I did that, you know? And then I had to learn, right? I had to learn, you know? It was a complete switch, you know? I never had any kind of contact with kids like this, so I really had to learn, but that's how it began. So it's a good, I had to give the convocation address to the incoming freshmen at Champlain College. And I said, you should pay attention to what you're curious about. You know, you should pay attention to something that sparks your interest, you know, no matter what it is. And you know, it's kind of people will disagree with me, and I have a boy going to college next year myself, you know, but I'm telling him, I think you should really try and find out what is your passion in life? What is it you really want to do, you know, and follow that, because that's what I did. And it worked out really well for me, you know?
Well, you know, one of the things that I love about your story is something that comes through for most of the people that I interview on the podcast is this element of curiosity. Almost every single person makes a comment like you just did.
Interesting.
You said, and I wrote it down, pay attention to what you're curious about.
Right.
Almost everyone. I was interviewing okay, Mark, do you remember when plastic straws became public enemy number one? It was 2015. Right. So I have this great interview with Nathan Robinson. He was the scientist who took that famous video. He was out in the ocean studying sea turtles and the bits of life that live on sea turtles. So they had the sea turtle up in the boat and they could see this white thing sticking out of its nose and they thought it was a tube worm. So they start pulling on it and out it comes a drinking straw.
Oh, geez. Wow.
And, you know, we had the nicest conversation in that podcast about curiosity and about what comes next. And, you know, we could have spent the whole episode talking about garbage and in the ocean and plastic trash, but we barely even spoke about that. He is just such a naturally curious person that
Right.
we just rolled from one subject of wonder to another to another. And that's, he did nothing to promote that whole anti-straw movement, but it's spread around the world. And he's pretty sure there's over 10,000 organizations after that video that sprang up to limit the use of single-use plastics.
Right. Right.
So back to our
Yeah.
our notion about, he just said, oh, this is not a tube worm. Get the phone, get the iPhone. Let's film this. As soon
Right.
as he realized. Now
Right.
that video has had 78 million views.
Are you? Wow.
And it's fundamentally changed the future of our plastic use, all by
Yes.
this one little moment where
Yes.
he went the extra mile for about 2 minutes,
Right. Right.
saying, somebody get a phone. This is
Well,
a moment.
I think you're right, and especially think how social media has changed things. Think how YouTube has changed, and there's some good and some bad, but there's a lot of good too. I mean, it's brought things to the fore, a lot of injustices, things that could be improvements that we need. You're right. So,
Yeah,
I
so
give him a lot of credit.
turning and he had nothing to do with all these programs that he just posted the video. So sometimes if you're just that one cog in the process,
Yes.
like we
Yes.
said, you don't have to only start if you can make a touchdown for others, but
Right.
you can do that one thing.
Right. Well, it's funny. One of the things I write in the book is, and some people disagree with me, but I was early in Vermont. My other son was looking in colleges. We went down, we looked at Middlebury, which is gorgeous, ski slope, golf course,
Everything.
cafeteria looks like the nicest restaurant in Vermont. And right after that, somebody donated $50 million to Middlebury, and then somebody donated $10 million. And I was just like, gosh, I mean, right? I mean, it's a good school and all, but man, here we are at Spectrum. We had no money. Our houses were falling apart, So anyway, I said to my wife, somebody should write about that. She said, you should, why don't you write about it? You're a good writer. So I thought, yeah, let me write about that. So I just blindly sent it to the Free Press. I didn't even know if they'd run it, and they ran it. I walked down Church Street. I was like a rock star. Everybody was stopping me. Everybody. One of the wealthiest people in Vermont emailed me. I read your column. I want to meet with you tomorrow. And he wrote us a check for $25,000. So my wife said, you had a nerve. So you know what I did? Remember there was a Borders back then on Church Street. I went into a Borders on a Friday afternoon. It was rainy. Went to the business section. I pulled out Forbes, Fortune, Cranes. I pulled all the business, laid them all out. And I looked at them and I said, Forbes has got like an opinion column. I went back to my desk, Forbes.com, contact us, paste it in the column, hit send. Somebody from Forbes called me. That was Friday afternoon. Somebody called me Monday afternoon. I'm my editor at Forbes. We got your email. I'm sending a photographer up to your city tomorrow, and we're going to run this in our next issue. Do you know? Can you believe that? Can you? So like that one little, reading that thing and thinking, what? Come on, 50 million to a place that already has an endowment of almost $1 billion. And Spectrum is just one of many organizations that are really helping people who are really, hurting, and, we're just one. But I mean, and so that just blossomed. It just, and then this is funny. My wife's grandfather was like 96 at the time. He said, you should send that column to Warren Buffett. I was like, Granddad, Warren Buffett, he's got 6 layers of secretaries to protect him against people like me. I did it anyway. Warren Buffett wrote back to me.
Okay. Now,
and then a year later, the same grandfather says, hey, you're married to one of my granddaughters. One of my other granddaughters is dating Warren Buffett's sister's grandson. So she put me in touch with Warren Buffett's sister, and she's the one who pays we have a warming shelter in the winter in a church hall. Mrs. Buffett's paying for that. I mean, but it was because of the one idea I had, the one column, you know what I mean?
Okay, so this is how it works. I mean,
Yes.
Anyone listening to this, now I'm on about my 5th set of goosebumps. This is the way it works.
Yes.
When we get on it, when we take those first steps, when we just, and you didn't turn yourself inside out. This wasn't weeks and
Right.
months worth of work. You just
No.
poured your heart, I'm
Yeah.
sure, and your logic and your wisdom of experience into this article. And this
It
is
took
what,
off. It took off from there. And
yeah.
he's passed away. He made it to 103, my wife's grandfather.
Wow.
He worked for J. Edgar Hoover. He was a former FBI agent. But I mean, it was listening to him. At first I was like, what? But hey, these things, right? Sometimes that's a Hail Mary. That was a Hail Mary.
That was a Hail
Back to
Mary.
the football. That was a Hail Mary.
Yes. And but it takes courage to do that, right?
Yeah, it does.
You were
It
telling
does.
yourself a story about how no one would read it, or there was 6 layers of secretaries, or gosh
Right.
knows all the stories you could have listened to that you were
Right.
telling yourself.
Right.
But a
Oh, yeah.
Hail Mary takes courage.
Right. So try it.
Yeah.
They may drop the pass, or you may
Okay.
throw, or
Or whatever.
but maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah,
So,
we just put my daughter Liesel in for an award as a social innovator of and it took a long time, and it was very taxing to fill out all this stuff, this information they wanted to know. And I found myself turning to my secretary and saying, you can't hit a home run if you don't ever swing.
right. Or even get up to the plate.
Yeah. So we just plowed on 7 hours into this social innovation summit that's coming up, and
Yeah.
they were looking for young, I'm assuming young people that are doing good in the world.
Right.
So okay,
Right.
so we're going to take a break on that subject.
Sure.
And I'm going to talk in the break here about this amazing thing that we've created for innovators all over the world who are feeling alone. I
Okay.
know you and I have had many sleepless nights where we've felt like a lone voice in the darkness.
Sure.
I mean, this is the common theme that runs through almost all the social innovators that we write about on Ever Widening Circles, is that each one of us seems to be like a little point of brightness in a vast darkness. And we recognize that most of us share the same troubles, the same how do we finance this? How do we get to that next level and provide that next cool thing that we know would do so many people so good? How do we get a website built? How do we find a trademark lawyer that's not going to rip us off? All the things, right?
Right.
So we have created the Conspiracy of Goodness Network. It's kind of a cross between social media and a platform for personal and professional growth for people who are wanting to make the world a better place.
It's great.
Everything from volunteers to learners to founders. So we're take a break, and we come back, we'll pick it up right where we left off.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're back. And Mark, I do want to pick it up right where we left off. Okay.
Sure.
So we've woven this football theme through our conversation.
You started it. You started the football thing.
I don't know why that is. My husband and our whole family are basketball players. But it seems to be an analogy that we can consider in these days when it seems like we can't do enough. It seems like I don't know about you, but there are days when I just feel like I just am stamping out fires every day, and I never get to the real meat of what I know needs to get done. Tell me what you've learned. I think that youth, that we can all learn from each other, of course, but there's probably some really fundamental coping skills that that most of us either can a good takeaway message from the youth that you've chatted with, or that we can offer to others. Like, tell me about that whole world of coping skills and what you found useful.
The youth, many of the youth we've worked with have suffered from trauma. They've suffered really terrible things. I'm funny. I'm executive director. I go over and make dinner for them once a month, so I'm connected to them. And I'm going up next week to make dinner for the St. Albans kids too, But you do see, once you get to know these kids a bit, you really learn, wow, they've been through some really horrendous experiences, And it's
Yet they still trust and they still hope, right?
it's hard for them to trust. I always remember, this is when I worked in Brooklyn with homeless kids. And I'll never forget, I talked to this boy and I said, how do you like your new social worker? And he said, oh, he's great. I like him a lot. Then I said, oh, that's good. Can you trust him? And he said, oh, no, I can't trust him. After everything adults have done to us, we can't trust anybody, you know? So I always remembered that, like, and there was a professor from Columbia who trained me and others. He's since passed away. And he was like, these kids wear a very hard protective shell. And your job is to somehow, through kindness and compassion, drill through that shell to get to the person underneath, you know? And I remember another worker who I admired a lot said, you know how when you and I walk through a tough neighborhood, we have that swagger that's like, don't mess with me. He goes, these kids wear that all the time, you know? They don't know how to take that off because they've been so hurt and so mistreated, you know, through their childhood. So that's hard, Linda, you know, that's really hard. You know, it's not the kind of way my son has grown up or, you know, but if you grew up in an environment of alcoholism, domestic abuse, you know, it's really hard to trust anybody, you know?
So when you
Oh,
cook these meals and you
yes.
provide these opportunities for kids to have real positive interactions and all that, tell me about the how that rebuilds somebody, or can it ever, or does it at least rebuild or build another view of
It
others?
does. In fact, last time I was over there, I could hear the kids asking the staff that they knew, like, who is that guy? Who's that guy in the kitchen there? And they said, oh, he's the boss. He's the big boss. He's like the boss. You know, it was really funny, you know? And I think they're moved by that somebody who's an executive director, you know, that is actually in there and sitting down and having lunch with them and dinner and made a nice dinner. And, you know, and I try and food means a lot. I've learned that in 40 years. Food means a lot. You know, like tonight we work with more and more new American youth, and I'm meeting with a group of them tonight at 6 o'clock. I said to the staff, what can I bring? Should I bring ice cream? She said, no, bring samosas. Well, I don't know how to make samosas. I'm going to go and buy them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think food is such an important part of any family. Like in my house, you know, my wife is busy. She's in the legislature. Our son is we make sure to have dinner every night. I mean, I wouldn't even say 6 out of 7. I'd say 7 out of 7, you know?
Really?
And, you know,
Really?
she may have a Zoom call after that, or I may have to do something, but at least we're together, you know, for dinner. And so I think with these kids too, that stuff's really important. Those kind of routines, the same professor in Columbia, I remember you say to me, routines are important because routines mean safety, you know, and these kids have grown up in very unsafe environments, you know?
Right.
So rituals, things you do together, holidays, these are all very, very important. And if you say, this is so important, if you say you're going to do something, you have to follow through. It would be very bad tonight if I didn't go and buy those samosas and show up, because I've told that staff member who's probably told those kids, Mr. Redmond's coming by, you know? So I have to do this. I don't really want to do it. I'd rather be at home. But I'm going to do it because following through is so, so important.
That is such a great way to live in the world, period, right?
It is.
Is
Yes.
not to overpromise, but to exceed people's expectations.
Right. Don't overpromise and then underdeliver.
Right.
You know, family, you shouldn't do it. Parents shouldn't do that. An executive director, politician shouldn't do that. You should not overpromise and underdeliver, you know?
Yeah, because, you know, for most of us, this life's simple pleasures are the best.
It's true. It's really true. Oh, I always think, I took a group of kids. This is when I work with the kids in Westchester, and they'd all grown up in poverty. And there was a girl who was threatening to commit suicide, and she ran down in the train tracks. It was the middle of the winter. I ran after her, and all these boys came down and helped me get her. So I said, that night I was like, how do I help reward these kids, you know? So it was a little restaurant in Dobbs Ferry. It was like a TGI Fridays. It was not like so I called that. I said, reserve a table for 12. So I said to the boys, get in the van, come on. So we pull into the restaurant. We go into the restaurant, and they see the table set up. And this boy turned to me and said, "Is that for us? Is this for us, Mr. Redmond?" It was just like a little TGI. So I said, "Yeah." So we sit down and one of them says, "What's the limit?" I said, "What do you mean, what's the limit? What's the most what dollar amount are we allowed to order up to?" You know, because they had grown up in institute. I said, "Get what you want. Order what you want." And boy goes, "This is like the Super Bowl of food." So listen, so then they order. I wasn't paying attention to ordering. The waitress finally comes by and she's putting 2 platters in front of each kid. And I'm like, what the heck? So what did they do? What do you do when you go to McDonald's and you're a teenager? You order 2 hamburgers. They didn't realize in like a real restaurant, you don't order 2 entrees. So they all ordered like double, you know what I mean? It was so, but this was a new thing. Going to just a restaurant like that for them was, you know, but that's all they talked about forever, you know. And I made little honor certificates, you know, honoring them for rescuing this young woman, you know. So, but I mean, again, it was a simple thing. How often do you and I go to like a little TGI, right? You know, it's a big deal. It's not a big deal, but to these kids, it was huge. You know, they probably remember it today. You know.
Yes. And what they probably remember too is just that sense of abundance rather than always living in scarcity. Our moments where we feel abundance in the goodness of the people we're surrounded by, or you know, the starry sky can give us a feeling of abundance, you know, that everyone needs that.
No, it's really true. Everybody does need that, you know.
Yeah, and it's something so easy to do for others, you know. I think that's
true.
It's so that's what people are tapping into when, you know, you buy a cup of coffee for the person behind you in line. It's that momentary feel of abundance and possibility.
I took a group of kids once skiing. Now, how often do you? I don't know if you ski. I ski. Live in Vermont. Everybody skis. You know, right? It's a nice thing to do. I took a group of boys. They're all inner city kids. Drove them up to Syracuse, New York. We skied, and my friend took them in to get stuff, and they blew all the money on hats and gloves. So like that night, I was like, "We're not going back to that mountain tomorrow. I am here." I was so mad at them. And this one boy, he didn't say it to manipulate me. And this is a kid who really suffered in life, you know, had been abandoned by his family. And I was going to the men's room or something. We were watching TV and he said, "You know, today was the most fun I ever had." And I turned around, I said, "You mean since you've been in our program, like in the last year, right?" He goes, "No, in my life. This was the most fun I ever had in my life." And I just then and there, I turned to the 2 other adults and I said, we're going back to the mountain tomorrow." They said, "We thought you were mad at them." I said, "One of those boys just told me this is the most fun he ever had in his life. We're going back." So, but I mean, think about that, Linda. Think about that. One day in the slopes was the best day in his life. And I know he wasn't lying. I know he meant it, you know?
And how many other kids did you provide that same moment for that didn't tell you?
That's true. Yeah, none of those, although I will never forget, that boy left, the other boys left. One of them passed away, was killed in some kind of inner city violence, which was really sad. And but that same boy, he left and he called me a year later. "Mr. Redmond, I know I don't live at St. Christopher's anymore, but if you go skiing again this winter, can I go?"
Holy.
And we didn't go, you know. And I think about him and I hope he's, you know, it's years later, it's like 26 years later. I hope he's doing well, but you know.
Well, but again, you provided a moment of wonder and joy for one person. And as you said about our opening story, you know, that kid knew that took his own life. He knew for at least a number of moments in his life that he was cared, and that people cared for him.
That's right.
And none of us know how long we have in this world.
No.
None of us know.
I know.
So if we can, you know, so if we can provide a moment of joy and wonder for others, small or large, and we just propagate that daily in our
Right.
lives,
That's right.
you have no idea what kind of a wake you're leaving.
It's true. Yeah. To me, it's about kindness and
Yes.
generosity and compassion. And we can all do that. You don't have to do the kind of work I'm doing or the kind of work
Yes.
you're doing. We can
Right.
all do that. Doesn't matter what field you're in. We can all do that, and we should do that. And I think if we learn anything from the pandemic, I hope we learn a lot of things from the pandemic, but it is that how we look out for each other, and treat each other with kindness and compassion. That could be one of the long lasting lessons.
One of the things that I like to say, I've just done a second TEDx talk called "The Power of the Pause."
Hmm.
Oh, I'm sure you and I could go on about
Yeah,
the
I'll have
power.
to pull that. I'm gonna Google that one. I'm gonna
Let's
Google that
talk
one.
about, I want to have you back another day because I've
Yeah.
still got 5 other questions that we never got to. And you're such a fabulous storyteller. We could laugh our way all the way through this spectrum of
There you
of
go.
of
There you go.
sadness for the
Right.
world, all the way to the joy of realizing, which is what you teach me every time I talk to you. You teach me how powerful I am to improve the lives of others, even
That's
in
great.
small
That's
ways.
wonderful. So I
Yeah.
just want to say one last, yeah, so just back to the book for 1 second.
Well, that's what I
So,
was going to ask you about. Tell
yes,
me, tell me everything you want to tell me to get people to connect with your movement, your book,
sure.
yeah.
So, a very simple title called Mark Redmond, called Memoir. And, it's on Amazon, it's on all that. I'm encouraging people to, I published it, self-publishing through Phoenix Books. So there's Phoenix Bookstore in Burlington and Essex, and they have online, you go online, Phoenix Books, it'll be right there. I would love for, I recorded an audio version, so
You
it's
did?
on, Audible, everything else. People like to read books, listening to them. It's on the e-version. So if you Google it, or markredmondbooks.com, Mark with a K, markredmondbooks.com. I have a new website and it's on there too. So
We're going to give
that would be
links
great.
to all your
Good,
world
good,
down in the show notes. And
great.
so we will be sure to send people in as many directions as possible so people can plug in lots of places. I'll tell you, I have this thought that I want to share with people. Your book is an excellent listening book for walks.
Oh, good. That's
Oh,
good to hear.
oh,
That's
people
good
are
to hear.
walking more than ever. Man,
Okay.
get the audio book. If Mark, I was wondering if you had one because that I had to record mine twice. It was
Oh, yeah,
such a
interesting.
project.
Oh, it was a lot of work.
It's a project, isn't
To
it?
do it right. To do it right is a lot of
Oh,
work.
I know. So Mark's book is an amazing book to listen to if you're a walker. Just plug that thing in. You're going to hear stories. You're going to have hope. He's going to take you high, low, sideways. But mostly, that book makes you feel like anything's possible. Like you
Mm.
can influence the future of others, and that is so empowering in these times.
It's good to hear that was
Yeah.
that was the idea. That was
Yeah.
the idea. It's
Yeah.
funny. I met an agent like 8 years ago, and he said, if you're gonna write a book, it's a book that scratches an itch. What's the itch in society? And I had that on a little post-it thing on my computer screen for years. Write a book that scratches an itch. So I hope this book scratches the itch we got right now.
Oh, I tell you, we're gonna turn a lot of people onto your work and perhaps inspire them to take some role in it. But that's the first thing to do is get the book. It's called Called,
That's
a
right. One
memoir.
word, called. I wanted one
Simple.
word. I
Yeah,
said I
it's
sent a
simple.
bunch of people read it. I said, there's some various titles. And everybody was like, no, that's the title. That's the title. You know,
That's the title. It really is.
good.
So, Mark, thank you so much for being on the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast today. For more information about all of Mark's work, it's going to be in the show notes. You'll find it there. As always, dive into ever widening circles by visiting us at ewc.co, everwideningscircles.com. Um, this is where stories of people like Mark, thousands of them, live to inspire and teach us how we can also make the world a better place. And subscribe to the Ever Widening Circles app. That is like the antidote to the daily news, right in the palm of your hand. So have a great day, Mark. I do want to finish up by saying this youth drop-in center has just opened. And today is kind of their grand opening. I'm going to make sure to be a part of that today. And I can't thank you enough from all of us in this little town and for all the lives you've touched. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome, and thanks for having me back in your podcast. It was delightful as always.
All right. Have a great day. I
You
hope
too,
your
Linda.
connection. Okay. I hope everyone's connections to goodness and progress that we've found today carry you through your week. And check out my other guests. I finish these podcasts most of the time, and I've smiled so much that my face hurts. Have a great day.